color underneath. You can see that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just what happened because it cooked a little bit while it was in the microwave. So that's not a big deal. So just wanted to let you know that if you saw that, it's not. You can see exactly what's going on. Okay, we've got a good view here. So you can see that discoloration a little bit better here, but still there's nothing wrong with it. That's just what happened when I microwaved it. So if you've ever tried to process a butternut squash, you know it's super hard. So this, I'm going to show you, is going to cut like butter, and I'm super excited to do it on camera. First thing we're going to do, we need cubes and we need to peel it. So the easiest way to peel it will be to cut it in half right above the wide bottom part. So you may have seen other people cut it in different ways, or try to peel it whole from top to bottom. I think it's easier to peel if you do it in 2 sections because this bottom section is so curvy. That's my opinion. So that's how I'm going to show you. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off the top and the bottom. Watch how smooth this is. That's crazy. That's not how this goes if it's not been microwaved first. So we're going to cut off our bottom section. There we go. Beautiful orange inside of our squash. Now we're going to cut it just above this bottom curvy section. So now we've got our 2 sections of squash. This section has seeds inside of it. So we're going to peel them first, and then we're going to scoop the seeds out. So let's make some space here. You can use a vegetable peeler to peel your squash. I personally like to use a knife because it takes you less time to do it. If you use a vegetable peeler, you're going to have to go over it a few times to get it down to the dark colored flesh on the inside. So make sure that it looks this beautiful dark color and not, let's see if I can do a superficial one to show you. There you go. So you can see how it's not deep enough. So if you use a vegetable peeler, that's often what happens on your first round. So save yourself some time and just use your knife to get the skin off. Just like so. Go. And this thing is already soft because of the microwave part. Okay, so I'm gonna, got a little bit on the bottom corners here. That always happens. It's no big deal. Okay, that is our bottom section. Okay, now top, same deal. You can actually see the deep ring of the light inside flesh of the squash. One thing to keep in mind is your fingers might be sensitive to the sap that is right underneath the skin. So that is one reason to make sure you peel it all the way down. So you can actually see, I'm gonna have to peel this one a little bit deeper to make sure I get all the way down there. Or it may be dried out a little bit, which is totally fine. There we go. So there's my dark part. So I need to see if I can get to that. There we go. It's not a perfect squash, and they never are. So no big deal with that. Okay. Peel, peel, peel. You can imagine how much longer this would take you if you were trying to use a veggie peeler. But putting it in the microwave does help to soften it up for the peeling part as well. Okay. Here we go. There we go. Okay. All nice and peeled. Gonna get rid of my skin here. Okay, so now we need to scoop it. So I'm going to cut this wide bottom piece in half to expose the seeds. It looks like a pumpkin on the inside because it belongs to the pumpkin family. And we are going to just scoop out the seeds as if we were carving a pumpkin. So just like so, make your nice little circle around your seeds. You can save these seeds and treat them exactly like pumpkin seeds if you want. You can dry them out overnight, give them a good rinse and dry them out, and then you can roast them as if you were roasting pumpkin seeds. It takes a little bit of extra time to make sure they're dry because that's how they will get nice and crispy. So this squash is a little softer than what I have been working with because it was a little bit smaller. So when you do your microwaving, keep that in mind. If your squash is a little smaller, you could back off a couple minutes on the microwaving time because our squashes, the butternut, they're often huge. In this case, they were not huge, so I had to get quite a few small ones. Okay. Not a perfect scoop job. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're cooking at home and we're not cooking a 5-star restaurant. Okay, so now we want to do our next step, which is we're going to cut each section into slabs, and then the slab into wedges, and then the wedges into cubes. And I'm going to show you all of that. You're like, what are these crazy words, Kristen? So here's our skinny top portion. The slabs are going to be from top to bottom, and we want to try to make them as similar size as possible. Because when you have similar sizes, all of your squash is going to cook around the same amount of time, so you don't have to have some mushy and some done much later. So these are my slabs. So at this point, if you're comfortable, you can stack them on top of each other and cut them into wedges. If you're not, you can do one slab at a time. It's not a problem if that's what you prefer to do. So here, I'm going to see how this goes if I stack them and do them all at the same time. So slabs to wedges. We're just going to cut these into wedges. It's a little slick. So I'm going to take that back. I'm going to do 2 and see how it goes. So wedge and wedge. Okay, there's the wedges. They're all conveniently still stacked on top of each other, and then you're just going to cut in the opposite directions and get your cubes. And it all happens at the same time, and it's super convenient. So that is how you get cubes of butternut squash. I will say that is the top section. So the bottom section looks a little bit different, but not really too different. So I'm going to show you real quick how that's going to look just a little bit different in your prep. So it's not the same shape as your top section. So what I like to do is just turn it over. And we're also going to cut it into wedges, but we're not doing slabs because it's hollow. So you can't get any slabs out of this. So we're going to just cut this into wedges. Similar size. So that is your choice, what size you want. The smaller, the quicker they're going to cook. Considering how hard the squash is, initially, it only takes at max 15 minutes to cook this squash in the soup. So we've got our little wedges here, and then I'm just going to cut it into cubes from the wedges. They're not going to be perfect little cubes, and that's not a big deal. Just try to make sure they're uniform in size. All right. And that's how you do it. It's not super complicated, but as long as you get it in the microwave beforehand, you're really going to save yourself some time and some elbow grease. All right. So let's cook this soup over on the stovetop here. Let's see, get my camera all straight. There we go. Okay, so this is our butternut squash with beans and greens soup. It is technically vegan the way it is written on the recipe card, but you can take it and use it the way you like to prepare food at your house. So we've got our ingredients already prepared here, and I've already gotten started with my onions in the pot. So if you're making this at home, the way I would start cooking is to first chop your onion and get it into the pot and let your onions saute over a medium-ish heat, and then cut your squash. So you're doing everything. There's a step happening all at the same time, if that makes sense. So you're not finishing cutting your squash and then you're like, oh shoot, I have to cook my onions. It's going to take 10 minutes. And now what am I doing? You're actively cooking and keeping it all in a succinct time frame. So onions take about 10 minutes. So you saw how quickly I cut my squash. It'll all line up together. Cool. Onions are cooked. So at this point, all we need to do is add the rest of our ingredients. We've got about 1 pound of butternut squash. This is right around 3 cups of squash. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. I'm going to add 2 cans of chickpeas that I drained and rinsed really well. That helps reduce the salt content on your canned chickpeas because we're going to get salt from our broth that we're going to add. So there's my chickpeas. And then I'm going to add just a couple of big handfuls of collard greens. And so this soup isn't collard green heavy. If you want it to be a collard green heavy, go for it. That's what you like. You want more greens than beans. That is your choice, and you can totally do that. Okay, so I'm going to just get this pushed down here a little bit. And then last but not least, I'm going to add my broth. This is actually a vegetarian chicken broth, so it's like chicken flavored, but it is vegetarian. So you can use beef or vegetable or seafood stock or whatever you like or have available to you. You can also use water. You're just going to have to add some more salt to it if you use water. So keep that in mind. Try to get all of the little stock bits out of there. Okay. So the original recipe calls for 2 quarts of liquid, but I like it to be a little less brothy, if you will. I like a little less broth. I want it to be a little more chunky. So this is 4 cups, which is 1 quart of broth. So you can add more liquid if you like to. That's totally up to you. When it comes to choosing your broth, I did say you can make some substitutions there, but also keep in mind the salt content of your broth. So if you've got a full salt broth that says nothing about the sodium content of the broth, you can use, sorry, I lost my train of thought. If you're working with a full sodium stock, I would recommend to cut half of it with water. So if you're going the route that I took here and only use 1 quart, I would use 2 cups of broth and 2 cups of water to cut how much salt there is. If you're using a low sodium broth, no problem. It's already low in sodium, so you don't need to cut it. And this is only if you're paying more close attention to your salt content based on your heart health or if you have high blood pressure. So salt and heart health do not go together, but I know that salt is necessary for flavor. So we can find flavor in other ways. Speaking of flavor, the seasonings I'm going to add to my soup are, we've got some ground cumin and we've got some ground cinnamon. Cinnamon goes really well with the flavor of the butternut squash. And you're probably thinking cinnamon in a soup that's supposed to be savory. I don't understand. You don't really taste the cinnamon. It just adds this really nice warming factor that just ties it all together. So if you want to taste the cinnamon, you can totally add more there. That is totally up to you. My pot is like on the lowest temperature possible. Okay. So at this point, we've got all of our seasonings. I didn't add any extra salt because my broth had the salt that my recipe needed. So at this point, you would put the lid on it and you would cook for upwards to 15 minutes, depending on how big you cut your squash. So that is based on your squash size. I like to cut them small-ish, and it cooks super fast, especially if you started with the 5 minutes in the microwave at the beginning. Um, cool. I usually have a final product ready to go to show you here, but right now I don't. They did jack up my temperature, and it looks like we've still got some time, so we're going to see how this goes in this last bit of talking that I have to share with you. Okay. So, we talked about in the beginning, if you need cubes, you need to peel it. If you don't need cubes, you don't need to peel it. So I wanted to show you what the other option is for working with your squash if you don't need cubes. This is from some prep that I did yesterday. So it's already cut in half. So we'll set here. It's trying to come to a boil. I can see some bubbles. All right, we've got Lloyd in the background here doing our producing. Thanks so much. Do we have any comments or anything coming through the chat box?
Althea said prepping is the hardest part here.
Yes, Althea says prepping is the hardest part, and it really is. It's just a hard squash. I can't tell you how many times I've had a butternut squash in the bottom drawer of my fridge for a couple months because I'm just avoiding it because I don't have the time. But it really doesn't take all that much time when you use that microwave tip at the beginning. If you don't take anything away from this demo, it would be to put your squash in the microwave at the beginning to make your life so much easier. Thanks for contributing, Althea. Let me see, what was I gonna say? I was gonna add something else there. Oh, you can also boil your squash. I don't know how much time that takes, but you can submerge it in water and boil it until it's completely done. And then at that point, you would cut it in half and you would scoop out the seeds. So it'll be a little bit more difficult to scoop out the seeds because the whole flesh on the inside will be soft, but you can do it. And then the flesh will very easily separate from the skin and you can use it from there. Or you could cook it all the way in the microwave. So I have done this with spaghetti squash. It takes about 15 minutes for a spaghetti squash in the microwave. Yes, 15 minutes. But also keep in mind, if you're going to keep it in the microwave for that long, you need to make sure you poke some here. It's got a good boil going on. The greens are still pretty bright green. As it gets closer to doneness, the greens are going to lose their bright color, which is not a problem. It's just part of the science of cooking. So at this point, like once it's done, oh, that smells so good. Once it's done, you can taste it and see if you want any more salt added to it. I never add any more salt, but that's my preference because I just don't eat a lot of salt. So yes. Okay, a couple more things. You can use any beans that you like in this soup. Chickpeas may not be your jam. They have a little bit of a grainy texture. I like their texture. You know, I was just thinking, I'm not a huge fan of black-eyed peas. They're a little bit grainy, but I like chickpeas, and they're a little bit grainy. So just a thought that popped into my head. So use any beans that you like. You want to use black beans, pinto beans, any kind of red beans, any beans will work. Same thing goes for your dark leafy greens. I use collards today because they're in season. But you can also use spinach, which will cook in 5 seconds, or you can use kale or turnip greens or mustard greens, whatever you like the best. The mustard greens and turnip greens are going to add a different flavor, I think, would be really delicious with the flavors of the seasonings. And then last but not least, you're thinking, Kristen, where is the meat? You can use any meat that you would like to add to this meal. So I think that a ground meat would be a really good option, like a lean ground beef. You can add it to your onions at the beginning of the cooking, or some chicken or some turkey. Those would be really good. If you've got some leftover, like rotisserie chicken, like baked chicken or something like that, you could cut it up and add it and just bring it up to heat. And then you've got a meat option for your meat lovers in your household. But as it is, it's a really great source of fiber and protein from the all the veggies in this dish. And your beans are going to be your protein source. So it is boiling away. I know it needs a few more minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and check to see if we have any more questions or comments in the chat box. No more? Okay. Okay, my friends. I hope you will try this recipe at home. And I also hope you will let us know if you try it at home